All right, everybody, welcome to this week's edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Rick Hardy Rice, and my co-host,
Simone Cherie,
and correspondent,
Cameron Wallace.
All right, in the studio, we have no longer a guest. She's she's Blend family now, so I'm going to let her introduce herself to the people.
I'm happy to be back with y'all. It's Maya Dillard Smith. I'm a former candidate for United States Senate and a civil rights attorney, and I'm super excited to jump right in.
You know we love having you. I've been holding you off about 2 weeks because I was like, we got to get Maya back here and talk about all this great stuff that's happening. We're going to jump right into it. So, Simone, what's on the rundown?
Yep, we're going to cover a little bit about COVID just so everybody has an update there. And we're going to talk about a lot of state news because our legislative session is moving. It was kind of off to a slow start, and now those bills are moving. So we're going to talk about some of the most high-profile bills that have been in the news lately, including the 70, minimum 70 bills that were filed around election laws and election changes. And what's behind those. Right.
Douchebags.
And as well as some of the criminal justice legislation following a lot of what we understand to be really 2020's entire year, especially around defunding of the police. There was an advancement there. And then we'll talk a little bit about the high-profile cases that have also been in the news and how some of the counties are reacting to those cases. So, yeah, lots to cover.
All right, so where y'all want to start?
Let's start with the COVID update because there have been changes with regard to COVID vaccines in the state of Georgia. There's more groups that are eligible for these vaccines. You can pre-register for them. So right now, as of the update, it's individuals who are 65 and older and their caregivers, healthcare personnel, long-term care facilities and staff. We all knew that, and law enforcement and first responders, EMS, pre-K through 12. Educator staff, folks with intellectual or developmental disabilities are also a part of that list. And the vaccine locations, there's 4 of them. One's near the Delta Flight Museum. There's another in Albany, another in Habersham County, and then one in the Macon Farmers Market. So there was already lines, they said, on Monday. And only a certain amount of appointments available. But if that's something you are interested in getting, there's increasingly more and more access to those vaccines. And now that there's been a third approved or at least Johnson & Johnson, which is going to be a single trial. They're very excited that it's no longer a double dose. I know in lots of states around the country, there are folks who got their first dose and they're itching for their second dose. And so far,
you make them sound like crackheads.
Good. Well, I don't mean
they're itching for their second dose. You make them sound like crackheads.
I shouldn't say that, but I mean, you want to be vaccinated and fully vaccinated. And so the fact that a lot of folks are only halfway through, they're incredibly concerned about that. But so far, I think so good. And we have not seen the horror stories folks were talking about as far as growing a third arm.
Now, are you guys getting it? If when the now that let me just
you can't ask that on air. You can't ask that on air. Let's be honest.
Well. I'll jump right in there and answer my own question. What about that? So my mom's been an infectious disease researcher for 30 years on HIV/AIDS prevention, and I don't download Apple iOS updates till they work out the bugs. So my interest is ensuring that we have the science, that we know what the long-term consequences, both of the virus and the vaccine actually are, because contrary to public knowledge, this vaccine does not inoculate you from receiving the actual virus. It merely masks the symptoms. So you could be a carrier, yes. You could be a carrier of the virus and simply not have symptoms. It's to prevent you from dying, essentially. But it does not, at this juncture, there's no evidence that it prevents the transmission or receipt of the virus. So, I have some concerns.
So that's why everybody's they tell you to still wearing masks. I was like, why? If we getting the vaccine, why are we still having to wear masks?
We also haven't gotten to that critical mass for herd immunity, which is very necessary. So, the Johnson & Johnson trial that they just released, the single dose, has less effectiveness than the other two-part, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. I have some concerns. We're rushed to market, but we are where we are. And, as a parent, as an example, I have no intent of my children going back to school. This school year, certainly. I'm glad that the governor extended eligibility to teachers and administrators to receive the vaccine should they want the vaccine. But, I think we've got still a long road to go. Progress is being made. I'd like to see Biden release this relief to folks. I think it's very necessary, and I think it's actually driving a lot of the crime that we're witnessing across the country right now.
Well, apparently that's the thing that's hanging up with that legislation or that bill is apparently the minimum wage they want to slide in there, which, like I told them before we got on air, why are we still fighting about giving the same superheroes that y'all were talking about that saved the babysitters, the grocery clerks? Why are we still fighting about giving them a livable wage, which that's even a stretch saying livable because we're decades behind when it comes to inflation and cost of living and wages. So we're decades behind. Why is this still a thing? I don't understand. Why is this still a thing?
We have cognizant dissonance. We say one thing, do another, and then it's almost as if we can't walk and chew gum and hold folks accountable and celebrate where they're doing good and acknowledge and criticize where they've got work to do. And I think they count on us being in such a tailspin that we just throw our hands up and say, F it.
Oh, clearly that's what they're thinking about this whole absentee ballot thing. That's clearly what they're thinking, that we're just going to give up and be like, no. I just feel, and I said this last week, I feel like we talk about people being woke. I feel like this is the real definition of people being woke. The fact that people voted, went out, are still paying attention. This is the definition of being woke. I feel like there's a portal that opened.
Yep.
And in this space, we can get some stuff done if we really stay diligent. So,
but we also have to speak truthfully about what's what, because I get a lot of calls from folks who are more in tune than ever before about what is happening. But we do this inverse thing. Ultimately, all politics are local. But we as a society focus on the federal government, which touches us not as closely as our local politics, but we'll defer on the local and be focused on the federal. So there's some inverseness there. I think some of the other challenges when we have in this social media environment, in this 24/7 news cycle, we have headlines, defund the police, and then that sticks. And then it becomes you lose what is actually behind the slogan, kind of like Black Lives Matter. You know, when we say we have control of Congress and people say, well, if we got control, why are we not moving nothing? Because we don't have control.
I'm glad you brought that up. Can you explain that? What exactly? Because I honestly, I wondered. I was like, wait, so, and I'm too lazy to do the research. Since
That's
you're
okay.
Here, you can expound upon it.
So the Senate, every state in the country gets 2 senators under the Constitution. So there are 50 senators. Right now, 25 are Republican and 25 are Democrats, which means that the vice president will break any ties. But so many of the decisions under constitutional law that the United States Senate has to make is not by a simple majority of 50% plus 1, which are the ties she can break. Many of them are 2/3, which means that you need to have some of your colleagues across the aisle join you to pass certain things, particularly because we don't have hyper control. Okay, we don't have control. We simply have an equal split between Democrats and Republicans, and the deciding vote in certain issues is given to the vice president, who at this time is Vice President Kamala Harris.
Oh, so it's not enough to play out those scenarios.
But this is why we have to be truthful, because when you tell people you've got control,
literally, which was the narrative. It was like, well, we just need to get Warnock
like,
and Ossoff in, and we can get this stuff passed. And people are like, okay, well, we did what y'all told us to do, and now we still waiting on the stimulus package.
And we've taken civics out so people don't really fundamentally understand. I mean, because one of the other things, and you know, I know we'll get into it a bit more, it's like even in the election of Warnock and Ossoff, we certainly galvanized folks who had not gone to the polls in Middle and South Georgia. We were able to demonstrate some things in places where Democrats haven't had control for 30 years, okay? I take nothing away from that. But we must be truthful and honest that the reason those 2 individuals won is because Republicans didn't vote in either of those races, but they did vote in the Public Service Commission. There were 3 races on the January runoff ballot. The Ossoff race for Senate, the Warnock race for Senate,
and that other guy,
and the Daniel Blackman Public Service. There were more votes cast in the Public Service race than either of the other 2 Senate races, which means Republicans who were fighting between the Trumps and the traditional Republicans and concerned about voter integrity said, we're not voting in those. We're going to sit it out. To the tune of about, I've seen some numbers of about 40,000 people. It may be larger than that, and don't quote me because I just saw something about it last evening. The point is this. If we give people the false narrative that we've got control, when in fact, it was not just that we showed up, but that they sat out. This happened in Alabama 4 years ago in the Doug Jones race. There was a lot of talk about Black people turning out to vote, and we did in record numbers. Black people, other people of color, marginalized poor people turned out. But the margin that Doug Jones beat that crazy whack over there was exactly the number of Republicans, evangelical Republicans, who refused to vote for him because he was such a whack that they did a write-in campaign. So we really got to be looking at the numbers, and we got to get behind the narratives, because what will happen is we've got a new generation of voters. We ask them to come out, and we're telling them certain things, and then they're going to sit in this election cycle. We'll get to the midterms in 2022, and they'll be like, okay, so what's going on? And when 2024 comes around, they better be worried about AOC. They better be worried about AOC.
She's that chick.
So now I have a question, because a week ago there was headlines that former Senator David Perdue was going to be filing for re-election, and now we know he's not. So, and there's all this speculation about who the Republican candidate will be. But would you run again for the U.S. Senate? And what do you think? What do you think about the headline first?
Yeah, let's make that clear that you were in that batch.
I was in that batch.
So let's make that very clear.
So let me say this so that the listeners and viewers are clear. The race that we're talking about is the Warnock race, because Warnock was elected to carry out the remainder of the term that was left open when the prior senator retired. The governor had the opportunity to appoint Kelly Loeffler, and then the Warnock race was a special election. So he's actually up for re-election again in 2022 to retain that seat for the traditional 6-year term, okay? This is chess, not checkers, and folks better be very careful. Perdue came out and said that he was running.
Did the paperwork. Shortly after, Kelly Loeffler announced a bipartisan voter integrity initiative to rival Fair Fight called Greater Georgia, and talked about creating a big tent to bring everybody together to deal with some of these voter integrity issues, which I know we're going to dive into those bills. I posted something and said, so David has announced his race for 2022. What's she up to? Is she about to go for governor? Okay, because in 2022, we also have our statewide elections, governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, and attorney general. So 2021, this year, we got all our municipals. Atlanta mayor's up for all over the state. And then in 2022, you already know why I said
so here's my thing. Here's my thing. I'm not certain that David's all the way out yet. I think folks are playing their I don't even know what to call it.
They're maneuvering.
Okay? For me, part of the issue is I'm not interested to run for the sake of running. I'm interested to run for the sake of governing. And it's expensive.
Yeah,
it's expensive.
800 or how much? 850
million that was spent in that runoff. But here's the deal. In my race, I got 10% of the vote statewide as a first-time candidate. Had never run before. No one thought I had a chance in hell. I only raised $20,000 because I entered the race 2 days before Thanksgiving and 3 months before a global pandemic, where we had to shift all the ways that you engage with voters. So folks are very interested in how I was able to pull off turning 3 South Georgia counties blue, and I won them outright. I came in second in Chatham, Doherty, and 2 others. And so, I've been approached about running again. I'd like to see what gets done with the people who are there before making a choice. I believe that Ossoff and Warnock should be given an opportunity to demonstrate themselves competent for the role. I do not believe that once you run and win, that it's your seat until you die. We need term limits. We need age limits.
Thing too, yeah.
We need qualifications, because I don't know, and this is no shade to anyone, that if you put my resume to those resumes, that there's any question about qualification. Okay?
Facts.
And that's not a slight. It's simply to say politics has been reduced to a popularity contest. And so you get people who go there who tell you one thing, do another, because everybody who goes there gets rich. They become millionaires. Bernie wasn't a millionaire before he went to Congress. And then the people that support you, who are working class, poor, marginalized people, say, well, what about me? While you're getting rich, while you're going to get a pension for the rest of your life.
A very nice one.
Okay. What about the people that you were sent there to serve? And so that's always my consciousness. That's always what drives my decision making. I wish them both well. I'm excited to see what Warnock does on the agricultural committee that he's been assigned to, and what John Ossoff will do. He's chair of the subcommittee on investigations. And so, I think it's early, but I don't think they have much time, because the midterms are right around the corner.
Well, that's my thing, and I said this when they got elected. I don't want to see. I feel like there's this trend, especially in Georgia, with leaders getting into positions, just kind of staying in those positions, just kind of coasting.
Yep.
And if we're going to change anything, particularly in our communities, these who have to be held accountable and say, okay, we can see what you voting on, we can see what you're not voting on. So this is what we see you not doing, and we got to start holding them accountable, because they're just getting in these offices and just sitting there, and they're just coasting, and these communities continue to deteriorate because they're not doing their jobs.
Yep.
So I'm with you. I'm giving them a very short window, which may not be fair, but I'm just saying, you guys came in on a new wave. We're going to see if you can ride the wave. If not, turn your surfboard back in, and we'll put a new person out there.
I love it.
We're not playing this game.
Yep. And there's a term limits, like a U.S. term limits organization that I think is one of the biggest in the nation, that is trying to help states to guide through different pieces of legislation to call for term limits on Congress. And I know that Senator Bill Cowsert, who's on the Judiciary Committee here, is the champion for that legislation as well. And then I think a rep named Beth Camp is on the House side. Because I think a lot of people feel that way, and certainly a lot of individuals feel that way. We had a lot of retirements at the state legislature last year, but this would affect the U.S. legislature. I think there's something to be said about term limits. There's been I've actually heard a lot of opposition from some of our Democrats in the legislature about a lot of suspicion around term limits, a lot of suspicion around, well, what about freshmen who are coming in, and whether or not they will be able to learn from other folks. And then obviously, and certainly a lot of Republicans who said, well, yeah, there's something to be said about experience around the Beltway, but you also got to consider that the chairmanships and the other opportunities to influence are usually blocked by those individuals. There's a long waiting list for people who've been there for forever. And so, to me, I think I thought it was a universally popular idea for everyone except elected officials.
And it is.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is narrative. Okay, so California, where I'm a native, we implemented term limits almost 20 plus years ago. And the same arguments were used. What about experience? What about institutional knowledge? The knowledge is not with the elected officials. It's never, representative government was never meant to be a career. And that's the problem. It is not, you aren't going to that job. You're not even a public, a civil servant. You're an elected official, okay? The institutional knowledge exists with the staffs who sit there, not the elected folks, okay?
Well, that was an argument they made too, I think, was that what if staffers become super, super powerful because they're just sitting there for new person after new person.
But they don't make the ultimate decision.
That's true.
But as somebody who's been a staffer to electeds, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, others, the electeds don't know what they don't know if you don't tell them as the staffer, okay? But that's true even in corporate America, in nonprofits, in all organizations, okay? My only point is there was this, the sky is falling with term limits. Term limits became a popular idea in California to silence Willie Brown, who was the longest serving speaker of the state legislature, African-American man, who later became the mayor of San Francisco. He's a very flamboyant guy, but he gets the business done. Term limits have worked fine. But what they've also done is held folks accountable to doing some stuff because you don't got a whole lot of time to be there.
And I think that's the thing. Okay? That's what it has to boil down to.
So ultimately, I believe that term limits are necessary for our democracy to work well. We have people in Congress right now, Dianne Feinstein is one, where lots of questions have been raised about her mental capacity. She has been in Congress for 40 years. She wields a lot of power. And the time has come and the ship has long sailed for her to pass the baton. But many of these people stay in the job, one, because they have name recognition and the cost of elections is a barrier to entry to qualified folks. And the other thing is they want the recognition of dying in office. And I don't want to sound crass when I say that, but if you become the first female to lay in state, your name is enshrined in the history books. And so people are making personalized decisions about staying in jobs and roles as opposed to passing the baton. One last point. The largest eligible voting bloc in America right now is millennials.
Yep.
There's a reason why our Constitution allows for the president to be as young as 30, 35. Because if you look at every movement of change, it was started by young people, but that's because we did not have the technological and medical advancements to prolong our lives. So this notion that somebody should be in office at 87, at 80, and this is not with disrespect to the work, to the wisdom, to the knowledge. It's simply to say, how does the system remain fresh and new and accountable to the people if you're fighting old ideas and old ways when the people have long and since changed? And that's a lot of the uphill battle and the back and forth that I believe we observe, not just around race and gender, but age and just where we are in our mindsets about what our democracy is, what rights ought to be extended, and who needs to be under that big tent that we all always hear politicians talk about.
Well, one of my biggest issues with that as well that you brought up earlier is that why is it that 90% of incumbents really don't have to worry about their races? Like, it's why don't individuals go past that looking for the I in the parentheses? Why do they have to, like, especially if they don't know, and if we agree that there's a level of civic illiteracy out there, then maybe we just don't need to tell people who an incumbent is. Maybe would that be helpful? Like, why? I also feel like the public has some onus as to why people stay in office as long as they do.
Well, I think it goes back to your point about them taking certain subjects out of school. Like, if you don't know what this office is and you don't know how easy it is to go up there and, do the application to get into the race, you're not prone to do it because you don't think it's something obtainable. And I think that's part of the problem too. What we took out of schools, social studies, government, all that kind of stuff. I was shocked to find that people don't even know the 3 branches of government anymore. Like,
That's
you go on the street and
true.
ask them, you're like, what are 3 branches of government? What?
Yep.
Like, people just don't know these things because it's not a priority in our education system anymore. And, we don't really pass along education like that,
And that's
especially
by
as it pertains to politics, especially in our community. It's not something we discuss a lot. So I think that adds to the problem, too.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move to voting laws.
Oh, God.
And a lot of publications have been tracking all the changes that they knew were going to come at the state level with regard to voting because that's where the laws are made. So there are a lot of big bills that are under consideration in Georgia. There's over 70 bills that cover everything about the voting process from registration that we get when we get our driver's licenses renewed or changed, and whether or not it should say declined or whether or not it has to be some sort of more involved process, changes about drop boxes, changes about timelines. Lots of different changes. House Bill 531, I think, has gotten the most attention recently, and there's a lot of measures involved in this House bill, but they have to do with what we talked about last week, shortening the window in which you can request a mail-in ballot, requiring a photo ID submission with that ballot, which is going to require a printer or scanner, all those other sorts of things. Preventing election officials from mailing them up until like 4 weeks before the election. So lots of changes that are involved in this bill. An additional one that's come out, Senate Bill 69, has to do with the automatic registration piece. So, as the code is written now, unless an individual declines, they are registered to vote when they request that driver's license application, like at the Department of Justice. So this bill would require that people have to elect and then have to submit a signature. So it won't be the same as just going to get your license and then ending up registered to vote. So there's a whole bunch of different measures like that involve voting, and particularly voting by mail. There are some Democrat proposed bills that would, trying to make voting a right, as a resolution, as a bill. So lots of bills, but generally speaking, these are being pushed by Republicans quite a bit, and in response to what we all know has happened. So thoughts from the quorum?
Well, it's actually more than that, because I just saw an article in CNN that says our Republican legislators around the country are seeking to strip governors and officials of emergency election powers. So this is the whole game they're playing. This is the whole game they're playing. And like you said, it's all this checkers and chats and stuff. And I'm just trying to understand, is absentee voting that serious now? Because like you said, most of them set out. So it's like, why are we so aggressive about it?
I don't know.
No, they didn't sit out. Yeah, they didn't vote in those 2 races. They voted,
and it was largely Republicans.
They went in and they voted, whether it was absentee or in the ballot, and they skipped the first 2 and only voted in the 3rd.
But even on the general election, like for the presidential race, 24,000 less Republicans voted by mail in the state of Georgia than did for the Republican primary by mail. And that was because during that entire time, former President Donald Trump was telling them not to vote by mail. And they listened to him, and they did not vote by mail. They didn't vote at all. They didn't vote by mail.
Well, I didn't think
And so his little 12,000 differential, he took away from himself.
Because traditionally, vote by mail has benefited Republicans,
Yeah.
and it has been their initiative.
So that's why I'm confused. Like, why are we
These
going
machines
after
were
it?
their machines.
But these machines are their machines.
Yeah, that they now find fault with.
So that's what I'm confused. So what are we really doing? Like,
Well, I think it gets to the partisanship that we put party over the people. And that's on both sides, right? Because as you talk about where Republican governors are, I always have the question, where are the Democrats' 50-year strategy, 50-state, 50-year strategy? They ain't had one because they've been cherry picking from the top of the DNC, who's going to be where, in a situation that is an internal fight of Democrats between the elites and the progressives. And that is what it is. And so, yes, what we are observing are draconian bills, largely proffered by Republicans, but make no mistake, everyone is interpreting for themselves what it means for their overall benefit of staying in their incumbency, okay? And so sometimes you got elected officials that look like us in this room who are Democrats and blue who say one thing or are behind doors agreeing to things left and right, okay? My big concern about House Bill 531 is that it is so packed with not just taking away rights to vote, but banning and criminalizing people who are on the ground trying to push out the vote. So one provision is, if you know how I guess it was back at the August election, there were the long lines, 13 hours, and people were out there giving water and food to people, or chairs to the elderly, or holding places so people could go to the bathroom, which, by the way, is just community work.
Literally.
It's just community. Yeah. One of the reasons I go vote in person is because I like to see my people.
Yeah.
It's community. How y'all doing? Y'all good? It's a great day, ain't it? Okay. There's something democratic about the participatory democracy, okay? And the idea of taking the humanity out of, and this isn't even getting to the voter ID laws and the taking away, early voting and weekend voting. This is about, is this really who we are? Like, I just want to get to the humanity of it all. Is this really who we are? We're not going to allow, I don't care if you're in Bartow County or in one of the rural counties that's largely white. Would you not want somebody to give your grandmother a chair if she was standing in the line? And those are the things for me that just make me go, about what is being done, because oftentimes it is done without a sense of the age-old adage, you treat people how you want to be treated. And now we are in a time when we are wanting to win at all costs. So we're eviscerating the Constitution, eviscerating people's rights. And really what I believe this effort and this piling on is around the country is to dissuade and distract first-time voters who are like, I don't want any part of this. Because I have a 25-year-old who's very suspicious of the whole system. And she's like, what's the point of voting? You got an electoral college that gets to supersede the general electorate. And so why, again, do you want me to go spend 10 hours in line when I could be at work? And we've got to make it very pragmatic for these these first-time voters, these new voters, so that they aren't dissuaded and discouraged in the process, because while we, our generation and older, will double down and say we're at no cost, these young people are like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And especially if Biden doesn't deliver on student debt relief, if Biden doesn't deliver on this $1,400, they talking about $1,400 to $3,000. It's like, you've got to deliver on what you said before people start being like, oh, you're full of it too.
I mean, literally.
But some things are just fundamentally anti-Republican in the first place, like with the Sunday eliminations, which I don't think we'll go through. But the idea that, souls to the polls, like getting people away from voting on Sunday, like that's like it's a Sabbath. Like people shouldn't be voting on a weekend day and not having that provision there. So everybody's going to be forced who doesn't work during the week, which most people do, to try to figure it out somehow, or making lines on Saturday ridiculous and again,
that's a personal choice.
discouraging.
If the polls are open and I can't get during the week and I choose to go on Sunday, that's because some people are
But that
7-day
was
Adventists.
that was a provision of this, though, was to eliminate that option. So
Oh my God, this is stupid.
I don't think a big part of this for me is that, like, just structurally, I feel like we've got people who are first of all, beneficiaries of this process that should not have a say in this process. When I know that that's what electors do. But I feel like at the same time, when it comes to taking power from the Secretary of State, and I've worked in an elections office before, I like the fact that most of these people, even if it's just the director of elections or the director of whatever, these are agency folks. They're not non-government people. They are government, but they are generally speaking in their roles for quite some time. They don't have term limits. They don't have to declare a party if you're the director of elections or director of voter registration in a county. And I think that they know the process a whole lot better. So taking away their ability to say, listen, I know how long it takes us to get through this. I know how long it takes us to count. This is what we should do. This is what we can open up. I like them having more power over that situation. I don't like the idea that elected officials have power over that. And quite frankly, I don't think that people don't know enough, I don't think, for them to have power over that. And the idea that part of this law, you said it would make a lot of things a felony, would also make looking at another person's ballot. There's lots of overcriminalization in this bill.
Yeah.
But a lot of people need help voting. If you ever served as a poll volunteer, when you go there, they have provisions for people who are older and people who have physical disabilities. But a lot of times it is very much like how do I do this process? A lot of people are first-time voters or haven't voted in a while. And I don't think it should be something that elected officials have a say in because they have too much of a vested interest in the outcome anyway.
Part of the challenge, though, not that I disagree, it's the healthy balance, right? Because who's the head of the director of elections here in this state? The guy who always
The Secretary of State?
No, the guy under him, director of elections. He wears his glasses. He's kind of a big, round guy. Anyway, he is of the variety that you're talking. He runs the state elections, right? Problem with him is he was an employee who stepped down only to go back in as a consultant, making 2 or 3 times as much. So my concern is when they aren't truly public servants accountable ultimately to the taxpaying people, right? And so I think there has to be a healthy balance of accountability because one of the reasons we do elect a Secretary of State is so that the people have some will over who's doing what. But I do think there needs to be a healthy check and balance between those entities. There was one other thing you said that I wanted to piggyback on.
Part.
No, but it'll come back to me because I think it's really, really critical just as we kind of talk about the elections. You know, there's been this big thing in Fulton County with trying to get rid of the elections official there. And I don't know if y'all been following this at all.
Richard Barron.
Yep. And then the Board of Commissioners had a really ugly fight in public.
See, we were in Cobb because we had
Yeah,
Jericho.
and
So
it's been contentious the whole cycle.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like these bills are just trying to make it tedious so that people will just, like you said, throw their hands up like, well, so now I got to get an ID for this. I got to go scan this. I got to leave where and we're just like, it's not even that serious. I'm just not going to do it. I feel like that's what these bills are created to do, to just make us throw our hands up and just like, you know what, this is just too much to absentee vote. I don't feel safe enough to go out there even with the mask on. I don't want to be there for 2 or 3 hours. If I can't absentee vote with ease, I'm just not going to do it. So that's the part that frustrates me. It's like, it's just foolishness.
I think it's unveiling that America has purported to be the beacon of light of democracy around the world. And our democracy is not
It's a hot
that
mess.
much better than the ones that we advise.
Clearly not.
Well, after
Clearly
that
not.
siege on the White House, I mean, clearly I
Now, some things I think are important, but again, Georgia doesn't want to spend any money. So to the extent that I feel like there are real flaws, and as a former, I do think there are real flaws, but a lot of those flaws are going to take money to fix because you're going to have to invest in, if you want lots of transparency, if you want fast results, if you want greatness, you're going to have to spend money, and Georgia don't want to spend any money. So with the one bill, and I'll reference it as soon as I can pull it up, but they want to declare the dead, essentially. Like they want there to be some sort of link between dead folks and folks who are voting, just so it's more apparent to the counties before it can even make its way up. Which, I mean, there's a provisional ballot process. There's all these little fail-safes along the way. But I do think there's something to be said about the fact that, like, if you or I quit paying our car insurance today, we'll probably get pulled over tomorrow because they tell immediately Geico or State Farm can call our state and let them know, hey, they done messed up. And they're able to do that pretty quickly. So I do think there's something to be said about the fact that, like, there has to be better technological information flow between eligibility and non-eligibility. This reminds me so much of the voting rights campaign that happened in Florida, where the Secretary of State in Florida just claimed that, well, we don't know how people have served or if they're done or if they paid this or that. It's got to be easier than that. Like, they've got to have a way to communicate from one street to the other street to figure out who can vote and who can't. Like, I can't swallow that they don't have that capacity if they're willing to spend the money.
Well, I think the issue, though, about money is if we can afford $280 million for an election, there's money. So the problem, Citizen United, the problem is PACs, the problem is the elites, and also this notion that the system that you're already paying in as a taxpayer is not going to first prioritize money for you to defend your very rights, to hold the system accountable. But that's by design. That's number one. Okay, so then we do small scales. You might be poor, desolate. You might be a student, but give me $5. Give me $5. Give me $5. And all election season, Bernie, Warnock, everybody want $5. Okay, $5 add up to $980 million. If you told me to give you $5 to work out elections, where I could get a guide in advance about who the candidates are, because this is what I wanted to piggyback on, was people at the polls do need help. I get called when people are in the line and say, who should I vote for?
Yeah.
You know how many people,
True.
you know how many ballots I cast every election? Not because I'm in the line, because the people calling me saying, sis, I'm right here. Okay, let me go pull up your ballot. This one, screenshot. But in California, as an example, there is an election guide that comes out about every ballot initiative, the arguments for and against. You can mark that thing up. You can take it with you when you walk in. Because why shouldn't people be able to do their homework and take notes in with them?
And because things faster.
are electronic, why can't I pull out my phone and look at my notes when I do it? That's by design. So you get there and you're like, oh, I didn't have time to look and I don't remember, but now I can't look. And if you pull the phone out, then everybody's looking at you. Oh my goodness. This is not how our democracy was designed to be. So I think help is important. I think those guides are important, but money is not our issue. It is money. Money is about political will. We can always find the money. When they need to bail out banks, they find the money.
No, I know they can find it. I know they can find it.
Thank you.
So
they
my
refuse
only point
to
is
use it. They
we need
refuse
the
to allocate it
political
for this.
will and the accountability mechanisms for us as everyday folks to hold these people accountable. Because soon enough, they're going to get vigilante justice, just like they saw on the Capitol. But see, here's the deal. And we in Black History Month, the final couple days. Look, y'all, I ain't seen nothing Black History. Okay, I'm feeling. So I think the corporation said we don't want to piss these Negroes off no more. We gonna celebrate Lunar New Year. We gonna do some other stuff. They didn't have a whole lot going on 365. But here's my point. Something was very interesting to me about what transpired on the Capitol, because I'm born and raised from the birthplace of the Black Panthers, and I love the history of what it means to be organized people. And when they were fighting police accountability 50, 60 years ago, this ain't new.
No.
This ain't new,
No.
right? They took up arms under the Second Amendment to defend themselves, and they marched to the Capitol, scared the shit out of the people, okay? They did not go into a war with police, but we will obliterate that history and call them thugs and heathens. But somehow what these white folks did on Capitol Hill was patriotic. I'm totally confused. And what the Black Panthers left us after all that was said and done, with all of the community organizing that was done, is every child in America, black, blue, green, is eligible for free lunch because they did community kitchens that the federal government then co-opted into policy, that now we have free lunch. What will be the benefit of this MAGA movement for the benefit of the people? I don't know that there will be, but certainly I've seen where we have had to take up arms to defend our own rights, and to do it in a mechanism that attempted to defend our humanity, defend our political inclusion, and in so doing, we also changed not just policy, we demonstrated what could be done when meaningful, willful people come together to make change, okay? So, you know, I'm often torn. I'm not a lover of guns at all. I don't like them. I know how to shoot them, and I'm sharp. Because if and when the day comes, somebody better throw me something so we can defend ourselves.
Which you are very adamant about every time you're very adamant about it every time you're here.
How can I not be when babies are getting shot in the street and we got crazies? I go to the grocery store and they packing on the side. I've never seen this before. There's no ammo in the state of Georgia.
Oh, yeah, it's been a shortage.
It's alarming.
Deep ammo shortage.
Alarming. And the fastest growing owners of handguns, Black women. We not playing. Somebody posted something the other day. She was going out with her dog and her 38. She said, if you want it, come get it. I'm scared of us. We all, look, we're going to be the Wild Wild West all together. I just like to think if it come down to it, we're going to be on the same side, I hope.
All right, Cam, let's switch to Cam. Cam, the DA story, 'cause I definitely want your opinion. We talked about this last week, but he hasn't, so I definitely want to get this.
Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis, she has the Rashard Brooks case where he was killed by an Atlanta cop, and she also has the ex-president's case where he was trying to intimidate Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger with finding the votes. So she has been attempting to, well, for one, she tried to put that case off and they gave it right back to her, like, you just gonna have to go ahead and handle the big battles just like you handle the smaller battles. But she made a public statement with the interview saying that she was not really in a rush to have Trump prosecuted or to have the investigation moving forward. She was saying that she's not in a big rush to have that, and she thinks that it's really the social pressure around it that's kind of like trying to expedite the process, but she's saying that this investigation will take time, which I agree will take time, but I just want to hear your thoughts on that as far as like the investigation is going, things like that.
I mean, here's the double-edged sword. Again, we live in a 24/7 news cycle where clickbait is real sexy, okay? Our justice system is not. And there are many prosecutors who made their career on an important case or two or three, okay? I have come to respect Fannie a great deal, even when I disagree with some of the decisions or I wonder some of the decision making. As I understand, both with the Rashard Brooks case and with the case involving the AUC students that were dragged out of the car by the APD, who were later reinstated because of a loophole, that her stated intent in sending those cases to the GBI or AG's office was to avoid some conflicts and she had some questions about the way that the early investigations were handled and didn't necessarily want to taint her hands with it. Okay, that's what she said. What it appears is the way you described it, which is, I don't want to touch that, okay? And then you've got new DA Flynn Brody over in Cobb County on a couple cases, who's also over the Ahmaud Arbery case, who had to come out and look, I was hopeful that he won over the sister that was the Republican that Kemp had put in place. Holmes? The woman that he defeated in the election. So I was hopeful for Brody. What concerns me, though, is, and this is just my intuition, when you get in front of a news camera, you have to read from notes about why this case is being dismissed in the Vincent Truitt situation, and you appear nervous to me. One thing Fannie don't ever appear is nervous. If she decided, she's a pit bull. Well, what they got on you, brother? What's got you nervous? And so I don't, and this is not a personal attack on him. I think in the case of Fannie, and particularly with the Trump situation, I think it got legs of its own because we're in this hyper environment, hyper politicized environment. In the next 6 months, if I hear one more thing about Trump, I'm gonna be questioning anybody still talking about him. Dude's not in office. You got business for the people right now.
Literally.
So if you trying to make a name and a case off of Trump, I don't care if you're in Congress or in the local DA's office, that's a whole no-go.
Yeah.
Okay? Because the people's business needs to get done right now. So that's my feel on that. Here's where we are. They kicked the cases back. Now what you gonna do? And so in her race, one of the things that was concerning to people is there was a lot of debate about whether or not she had gotten a large amount of funding from the Police Officers Association. And that was very public. It was very public. It was very public in the election cycle because there was a lot of claims that she was bought by the police union. Okay? Oh. What will happen as these cases unfold is you will begin to hear more of that kind of narrative. Is she with the police? Is she with the community? Right. And she's going to find herself in a very interesting predicament. But this is a woman who prosecuted the Atlanta school scandal. And she stands behind it, even though there's a lot of black constituents within the city of Atlanta who question her motive, question the outcome of the case. And she has been steadfast that at the end of the day, the only thing that she cared about was redress for the children who had been wronged in the cheating scandal. So it will be interesting to see how all of that plays out as those cases come to fruition.
Yeah. Here's one thing I do want to ask, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but we're getting close to the things we were going to talk about. There was a wave of Democratic DAs in this past election in all these major places, and there's plenty of talk of secession in certain circuits, especially the Augusta circuit, because of that, and these other counties that don't want a Democratic DA in the Athens-Clarke circuit. But one of Athens-Clarke-Oconee? I think that circuit. But one of my questions is as far as the grand jury process goes, because that's what I think the press conference was intended to do for Flynn Brody, was to as quick as possible to come out and explain this decision. Don't make people hunt you down. Go ahead and have a press conference. However, I've only served on a trial jury personally, but there is so much reform I wish could be done to that process. It's not even funny. The grand jury process as well, and there's a couple bills there. But I was interested in whether or not charges versus facts should be presented to a lay group of people. Like for me, even in a trial jury setting, having a specific charge to deliberate with at the end of a trial was important. If we had to have the entire Georgia Code laid out in front of us and say, okay, well, what do we think he did, guys? Like, I don't know what unanimous consent we could have come to. So I'm very interested in that approach. I think he said, like his quote was, "This is my policy. Like, I'm going to present facts to lay people." And I can't totally understand that. I don't get the rationale behind that. I don't see how that helps justice. I don't personally love the idea of prosecutors, putting people in jail for a small weed bag, but I also don't like the idea of prosecutors never prosecuting either, because I think that is the point.
I think the issue for me fundamentally is the grand jury process, period.
Yeah.
It is an unfair, internal, inherently and intrinsically biased process. And the problem with him standing up to say that is nobody understands what you're saying except you and I. Lay people don't even understand what you just said.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because it's so nuanced, right? So the grand jury proceeding is when the DA gets to go proffer and indict or seek an indictment against someone based on a set of facts or the code or whatever the case may be. And they're lay people who've been identified, they apply in some jurisdictions. I mean, it's all like a secret, it's a whole secret proceeding where the person who's accused has no representation, has nobody in there, so it's a whole one-sided. And so to the point about,
which is why they were asking, like, well, what did you show them? And they,
I mean, so there's no transparency. Right. And therein lies the problem where you lead people simply to speculate, okay? And he may have had good intention, and that's what I'm saying. I just hated to see the brother stand up there and look like he was fumbling the ball. He was all over the place. I was like, oh no, that's not good, because it doesn't engender confidence from a community that is broken and needs answers. And the reason they elected you was to give them answers. Even if the answers that you are providing are not ultimately the outcome that they sought, if you are articulate and you can convey in confidence with a mastery of the law and the underlying facts, whether I like it or not, I might have to say, okay, brother, I got to eat that one. Okay? This one just sounded,
No, wasn't his first one, though. That was his first one.
I mean, there's plenty of time, God forbid, because we're not wishing more police shooting deaths on people. No. But he is early in his tenure.
But the problem with it is, if this is this one, Well, what you gonna do in the Ahmaud Arbery case? Because that's under your jurisdiction, and it's a national.
Yes.
So
But
no,
that is written in the stars already. I do believe.
but you
What?
know
I
that.
do believe
What?
it is written in the stars already.
But
What?
then what should he be doing?
The outcome?
What should he
Yes,
be doing?
absolutely.
Okay.
And if there isn't,
So-
we will all be outside
so-
with picket signs
And that's my
and bombs
and, that's my
and
point.
grenades.
And that's my point.
So I think that's
what is he gonna
up
do?
against the wall.
No, but here's the deal. I follow all these people because my race is statewide, so I can tell you what's going on all over the state. Okay,
That's why you here.
With all
That's
this.
why you here.
So if you look at Fani's social media, she posted something yesterday or the day before that said, if you come in to All Star and you commit any act of violence while you're here, expect to stay a while. Said what I said. The girl don't hold no punches, okay? It's one of the reasons why I can put respect on her name even if I disagree with the outcome of some stuff, because she gonna come with confidence. She gonna tell you what it is and let the chips fall where they may. I'm just saying.
I mean, I get
It's not
it.
everybody's cup of tea.
But
okay?
I get it. But my thing with that is, okay, all this big talk, but you're trying to send out a case. This case
There's
could
just a
make
lot
or
we
break
don't-
your
but there is,
your
but
tenure.
To be fair, there is a lot
Agreed.
that we just don't know, though. To be totally, and that's the hard part about the beginning of investigations,
Yep.
because there's all this media speculation, but we don't know nothing.
Yeah, but at
So-
the end of the day, it still got.
may not-
So
you
now
may
I'm
not-
concerned because you try to get rid of it with really. That's not really a good reason. You always come on the heels of your predecessors. That's not really a good
But I don't
reason
have a
to try to send it out. But you got it back now.
Yeah.
Can you handle it? Like,
some
can you
things-
handle it?
Well,
You talk big.
again. I don't
her
know.
bite
I don't
sounds
know
worse.
those
Her
facts,
bark sounds
but-
worse than her bite. Now, Fanny.
But a recusal is
Miss
not
Willis,
a weak move. Sometimes a
Miss
recusal is
Willis,
an integrous move.
It is.
There was a chain
It
in the
is.
Arbery case where that case did need to be moved. Like, oh, this is my father,
Well, yeah, but that,
my
but that was
godfather. So
legitimate
sorry.
though. But that when you hear, because when Flynn was here, he talked about how it went from different hands, and even I read the article. Yeah, that was a different case. But this one with her was just like, okay, well, you didn't want to try because you didn't really want to get your hands dirty. Okay, well, that's cute, but now you got it back. Are you ready to do it? Because people are especially our community, we looking at how this going
I
to play
think what
out.
she was saying was it's already dirty. is
That's what she
was
was saying.
Well,
That
yeah,
is
but
what
not
she
that
was
she
saying.
didn't want to
That's
get her
what
hands
that's
dirty, but it
exactly
was
what she was
tainted,
saying.
sort of, yeah.
Because to the point of this conversation, Paul Howard, her predecessor, had already got laid out for inappropriately assembling the grand jury during the pandemic to bring these charges because he did not have the proper. It was a mess.
And grand jury proceedings had been post.
It was a mess.
Have
Yeah,
they-
but what happens? Okay, so what happens when you send it out and you don't know where it's going to land? What if it lands in some?
Then it could land
that's
somewhere
what
else.
it is. That is the name of this legal game.
Sometimes
But
that's
here-
not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. But here's the thing. Okay, we would like to control more because we want to control the outcome. Okay, and rules just simply don't work like that in Congress, in the law, in your household. You can't be switching them up to fit you in the circumstances. The rules are the rules, and we need to play by the game. But it raises a bigger question that I think really hindered Kamala Harris in her presidential run, which is when you're a black person and you are on the prosecutorial side. Now, I have friends on every
yeah.
aspect of
There's
this
plenty
thing.
of black
I have people
prosecutors.
who have gone into policing because they want to do the right thing. Okay, I've had friends who have gone to be a prosecutor because you do have a lot of discretion. But let me tell you, honey, mess that thing up one good time.
Yeah.
Get the wrong case assigned to you that's a big profile and people don't understand the law and you're not good about explaining it
Yeah.
in a way that helps people understand. I have a friend who was just appointed police chief in the city of Oakland, bless his heart. You know how many people I know that passed on that job? It's a thankless job.
Sure.
And the only place to go after that is out. You are the fall guy. You are the fall girl. So do we want people that look like us in those jobs? Or do we just want people who have good integrity? And we've
Right.
got to make a decision about that. Because if you're white, you're Asian, you're Latino, and you have good integrity, Deborah Gonzalez, who was recently elected DA, do you know what she does? Every week, she writes a long what has been going on in the DA's office and what she's going to be doing.
Yeah.
This is what I mean about communicating. Because let me tell you, baby, she must be on that thing,
I
on
like
that
her.
email, because it's thorough. Every week, 6th week on the job, 7th week on the job.
But I also to the extent.
All right, we
everything
got to
that
wrap
you-
up so we
okay,
in our
okay.
last
Okay.
seconds.
But everything that you're saying, not only do I agree with, but I also think, like you said, that the other side of that is that it doesn't give me confidence, even as a black person, to hear a DA say, and when this is just one of the quotes, it was a long press conference, but one of the things that he said was, as an African American, I never want to what was it?
It was about his bias.
Yeah, I'm biased, and so it's important that I have. I didn't feel like that was fair. I don't think he meant that. I think he said it, but I don't think he meant it. I think what he meant was, I understand that this is a hard thing to watch, but everybody's biased. I don't think you need to articulate that as a black man. I'm biased, therefore I just fed the grand jury all this stuff with no context. That's what it sounded like to me.
Hear
It sounded
that quote, but
he said,
I'm
an African American man, and I'm biased. That was
Well,
his
he
quote.
said
So
something
does
to the
a white
extent of
man
bias.
stand up and say, I'm
So
a white man, I'm a biased?
I've never heard a white prosecutor say I'm white and this is why.
And listen, Mr. Brody, I am
doing
not
this.
contrary. I wish you well in the job. I'm just simply concerned that this is the first bite at the apple, and I'm more concerned if this is the first bite, what's going to happen in this Ahmaud Arbery case, because this is a national one.
All right, and we're
I love
out of
dealing
time,
with y'all.
people.
Thank
We
you
love
for having
you.
me.
We never have enough time when you're here. I'm going to
I
start giving
know.
your show 2 hours. All right, so final thoughts, 30 seconds.
It's an exciting time, but I think it's a critical time. And I say exciting only because I'm a student of this stuff, but people are hurting. They're struggling, and we need real results, both in criminal justice reform, voting, and economic recovery. And I'd like to see some movement there. Otherwise, we holding people accountable in 2022.
Facts, all facts. Cam?
Well, I'll just say this was a very, very interesting show. I'm just like in awe with your whole entire charisma.
I told you,
I'm
this
just
is
like,
this is my chick
yes.
right here. Like, she just,
But I think we touched on some pretty important topics, especially like the voting bills and everything. Like, and I wanted to just jump in and say, like, I want to know where we draw the line between like these voting laws becoming unconstitutional, because that's what they feel like to me. Because I feel like once we pass this whole thing as voting being a right, then we can go into
That's
this
the underlying
actually.
question.
Yeah, then we can actually go into this being unconstitutional. But until then, we just got to keep fighting for voting to be considered right. So. Yeah.
Good point. We didn't have time to cover this. So if you know anyone on probation in the state of Georgia, which is 1 out of 18 people, so it should be plenty of people you know. You served over 3 years. You've not been revoked in the last 2. Email cases@reformalliance.com. I'll just leave it there. We are not only passing legislation, we're also trying to help the people who've been denied their right to early terminate to get that right, which means that they need assistance in the legal system. So cases@reformalliance.com is what you can email. If you're on probation, you've been on it for 3 years, you have not been revoked for 2 years, email that, and then hopefully we can help you once this legislation passes. It's Senate Bill 105, which I'm very confident about, to actually help get people off of probation.
all right, so I just have fun because I always have fun with Myers here. So, we will see you guys next Friday, same time, same place on the Leadership Blend live podcast with your host, Ricardo D. Rice.